Okay, it is an absolute honor to be here. The more contested this festival became, the more I wanted to be a part of it. And and it's really a privilege for me to be sitting up here with the two panelists who are present, and then also an honor for all of us, for our panelist who is coming to us from Palestine. So let me take a brief moment to introduce everybody in the order in which they are going to speak. Okay, so immediately to my left is Professor Noor Jouda, who is she is an assistant professor at UCLA in the Department of Asian American Studies. She is a geographer who works on Palestine. And then to her left is Ibrahim Abuammar, who is a respected business person in this region here, and has a very original and lovely presentation about his own sense of the history of Palestine. And then third, but not least, is Dana Abbas, who is working with Reconstructing in Ramallah, and will be talking to us about sort of the rehabilitation of villages outside of Jerusalem, and she will be talking to us. She will be number 3. Hi, Dana. Very nice to see you. So with no further ado, I will start by presenting to you all Professor Jouda.
Do we go up there?
If you want to, whatever you want.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so thanks so much, Eve, and to everyone at Powell Rights for organizing this weekend in the face of so much. I have the privilege and I think good fortune to get us started today, and I'll do my best to keep this short so we can have hopefully a lot of conversation with the audience. So, things like what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, the Palestine Reconstruction Competition, and the projects that Ibrahim and Dana are participating in, really do so much for the way that we think about time. And so that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. The most important thing I think that we keep in mind as we have conversations about return or use terms like reconstruction is not to let our sense of what those words may mean in some languages limit their potential, right? So time can evoke a sense of surrender. The settled world implores us and pushes us to believe that in order for us to build paths forward, we must only deal with the present and what is to come. And it's not that there's necessarily an insistence that the past is irrelevant, but it is assumed that the past is complete. And this is an idea that Palestinians and indigenous communities the world over have always known is not the case. We have never seen temporality or our experiences of time as linear, point A, point B, point C. The poets in this room and readers of Arabic poetry especially know this more than anyone as they build stanzas in Arabic that take us from centuries past to centuries forward in one breath. So if we take a word like return, for example, it conjures an image for us of moving backwards on a path already taken or us resuming a particular activity. But when that former path is actually one of displacement and loss, return instead invokes a new possibility of a life world to come or one made anew. Within return becomes a reclamation of ownership, not one that's defined by boundaries and property deeds, but an ownership of community and self, an ownership that restores connection. So if we think about the concept of duration, right, as more than just affirming survival, but it embraces this idea of an unconfined temporality, a timeline that is imbued with freedom instead of constriction. And as Palestinians, what we call this indigenous duration is essentially sumud. It is a state of living through and in the past and the future daily, right? With every moment inextricable from the other. So more than just surviving, it embodies connection and an ongoing sense of presence. So it's a steadfastness that's rooted in moving forward. So if we take a brief look at the example of the Palestine Land Society's Reconstruction competition, Palestinian architecture students here are telling a story of dwelling in the future. In the process of creating their designs to reconstruct destroyed villages, they show us just how little bifurcation or separation there is between past and present. University students majoring in architecture and urban planning are charged with redesigning these villages on the same site, but with updated services and using data on projected population. Submissions include the design for rebuilding the village, as well as a written component about historical characteristics. The designs, as you'll see as I click through here, vary greatly, and we'll come back to each of these, vary greatly in sort of aesthetic. But all of them contain public squares, museums, attempts to address new road systems, the use of oral histories and satellite imagery. The most beautiful, I think, of the commonalities between them, that is not a requirement but spontaneously shows up in all of them, is the presence of what are called guest houses or reunion hostels for refugees. And the idea is that for those in diaspora and exile who may not decide to return permanently, they will always be planned to have a space in these villages as they're rebuilt. They can be incredibly detailed layouts like you see here. This is one of the first villages in the Jerusalem area to be occupied in 1948, Al-Qastal, to breathtaking images like this of Ain Ghazal, which is centered around the revival of its Ain or spring, and instead of classic planning like we see in the one before, actually locates all of the residents in a central construction and tasks them with redesigning their future homes once they've resettled and reconnected with their community. Others zoomed out entirely and wanted revival to be about a reimagination of districts altogether, with some villages slowly confronting decades of fragmentation by creating new sustainable systems among them. So areas where waste would go, the way that trade would process, where energy would be pooled from. For these students and this project of village reconstruction and many other projects in the same vein that Ibrahim and Dana will talk about, the spaces that Palestinians map and dwell, I think what we see very quickly is not confined to the present. We are not confined by one memory or vision of houses and land emptied in a distant past, but we're guided by a vision of rebuilding and reviving those spaces and the interactions that filled them. These village designs and the conversations involved in producing them and their presentation to the community, a lot of these have actually, in the last several years of the competition, the design winners have zoomed into refugee camps in Lebanon and in Jordan, et cetera, in Gaza, and actually presented the designs to the descendants of that village and opened up a conversation with them. These experiences have not been an abstract one, right, for the participants. They are cartographic processes, they are mapping processes that insist on a particular future, a decolonized future, and one that instead redots the map not with historic places, but with the idea of future histories, because as we know, everything eventually becomes a bit of history. So that's all, and I'll let Ibrahim take us out.
Well, good evening, and I do hope that we can keep you awake and interested in what we are covering here. To start with, I'm just going to say that I feel very emotional being part of this incredible festival, incredible conference, especially after an amazing opening and powerful words by Susan Abul Hawa, Huda Fakhruddin, and Roger. I think the attacks on us, as everyone had said before, it really proves that we are doing the right things, we are telling the truth, and the truth obviously scares the other side. To start with, as the introduction was, my name is Ibrahim Abuammar. I'm actually a retired pharmaceutical executive who spent 40 years in health sciences and pharmaceuticals. So I'm not an academician, I'm not a historian, I'm not a researcher per se. I am a poet, a published poet, an activist, and a photo documentarian. I looked for that word, by the way, to make sure I'm writing it correctly. Focus really entirely and solely on documenting the Nakba through visiting and photographing the remains of the ethnically cleansed Palestinian villages that basically started during the Nakba. And the Nakba started before 1948, decades before 1948, and that's not the place to discuss it. The project, my journey, it started as a personal project, as a personal journey. Once I retired at age 55, I was looking for something meaningful to do with the rest of my life. And for the last 6 years, I began this journey with a singular objective, which is to make sure that I visit as many of the 538 villages that have been destroyed as I can before I leave this world. There was really no particular objective behind it except to say that I've been to these places, that I felt the stones of all these villages, that I've touched the wall of the mosque. Excuse me, I get emotional every time I talk about it, so my apologies in advance. I didn't have any intention of publishing a book per se, or giving a lecture tour. I did it for me. And suddenly I realized that it's an enormous task. I have so far visited about 100 plus villages and sites, and quickly discovered that to cover the 538, and this is in a space of about 5 or 6 years, it's really going to take a long time. And I'm committed to to visiting as many of these places as I can for as long as I can. Many of the, so the title of it's the wrong set of slides, but it doesn't matter. The title of the slide, really the title of my journey is في الطريق إلى البئر, on the way to the well. It conjures a lot of images, has a lot of meanings. Basically, it's the return, as far as I'm concerned. Going back to who we are, going back to Palestine, the true Palestine. What I've discovered during my tour, that some of the places, 538, they're scattered all over Palestine in clusters. In the center, I've discovered in the center around the Ramli and Yafa, this the largest cluster of the ethnically cleansed villages. Then we're talking about the north, the far north, and even down the south in the area of Gaza. But the bulk of them, a large number of the villages are in the center. I've discovered that it is not an easy task. Well, some of the places, some of the villages were relatively easy to visit because they're either completely wiped out, there is nothing to see per se, so it's an open land, save for a ruined or destroyed cemetery or a partial wall of a school. So these are easy. I can get to anytime I want. There are places that were conveniently converted by the Israelis to national parks, for their people to go and have their picnics and walk and so on. And some of these villages that were converted into national parks, they had some buildings like a mosque or a shrine or an old school that were converted into places to play in for the kids. So even the mosque, holy places were desecrated and used for their pleasure. And there are many other sites, villages that are not reachable because they were fenced in either by the government and declared as a security zone, and you shouldn't try and reach it because they're monitored. And others that are fenced in as private property owned by the new farmers for their cattle to graze. I'm a risk taker in a lot of things, and this is one of them, is that if I can reach it, I will. Even the places where it says it's private property, but it's fenced and it's not a government sign per se, I'm willing to climb under the fence or over the fence to get in and document it. Two anecdotal stories. The first time that I visited Deir Yassin, the site of one of the most heinous massacres, and the ugliest massacres in the history of the Nakba, I really had no idea I mean, I knew where it is, but I had no idea what I'm looking at. When I got to the place, I saw that there is the center of Deir Yassin, the center of the village, was almost completely intact. The buildings are there, used for a purpose, and I'll share with you what that purpose is. But it was completely walled with with steel bars and wires and cameras, and the big sign said that this is a mental institution. I tried to kind of play stupid and walk into the security office and ask whether I could go in, just take some pictures, and the answer was no, of course, because it's a hospital, and unless you have a relative in there, you can't go in. Did the next best thing, and that is walked around the village and took pictures through the slats in the wall, in the fence, until suddenly two showed up behind me, security guys. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm documenting history. I'm taking pictures of this old place." And they said, "Well, you have to cease and desist, and don't ever do that again." Luckily, they didn't take my phone. They didn't confiscate anything, and I was able to keep what I took, the pictures that I took. Another example, which is it's softer. The village of Ijzim, which is part of the small triangle, we call it. It's south of Haifa. It's a village that's almost completely intact. People live in the houses that were Palestinian houses. The mosque is still there. It's not maintained, but it still exists. The school, it's still there. It's utilized as a religious school. So the first time that I went, as I parked my car, walked around, taking pictures. When I got to the school, started photographing the school, and I was stopped by one of the residents who said politely, "Oh, can I help you?" I said, "Well, no, I'm okay. I'm just taking some pictures of this old building." He said, "Yes, this is a building. This whole place used to be called Ijzim." So there was no denying, it's pleasantly surprising. But also it was very helpful. He said, "If I can tell you where the mosque is, I can tell you where the Khan is, I can show you some of the other houses." I said, "No, I'm good. I'll find these things myself." So what I'm getting at is it's been, the challenge is varied in getting to these villages. Very often you'll get people questioning what you're doing and a pushback on to stop or cease and desist. In other places, it's you have almost a free hand if you do it and you do it carefully. So where am I going with this? So it's like, I've had a lot of people, a lot of friends, whether they are actual close friends or virtual friends, urging me to put this into a photo book, into all the work that I've done so far, and publish it as in support of the story of the Nakba. And obviously I'm hesitant to go in that direction. However, being a poet, every time that I visited one of the sites, one of the villages, I've always felt inspiration or feel affected by the place, by the site, by where I am, to write a poem. And so each of the village has a poem attached to it, which gave me the idea to publish my third and my last collection of poems, which will have, it's basically titled in Arabic, في الطريق إلى البئر, which is coming fairly soon, hopefully within the early part of next year. So I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to hopefully having a discussion with everyone on this very important subject. Thank you. This is a long presentation. I trimmed down, but there was confusion. That's why I didn't use them. So I've categorized the kind of as a sampling. Sorry. The pictures that I'm sharing here into three categories. Erased from existence, villages that really you can walk and you wouldn't know that they were there at all. Rihaniye, which is in our area very close to to my town, and it's used to be part of the Haifa district. Al-Mazar also part of the Haifa district. It's half of it is designated as a military zone and you can't reach, which is the top of the village. But what's left there is, some partial walls, but virtually wiped out. Beit Sosin, same thing. It's near Ramle, one of the Ramle villages. Nothing left except for piles of rubbles of stone. Dallata near Safad, same thing. Iraq is Sweden, nothing, absolutely nothing left of that village near Gaza. Khubbezi, same thing. The only thing left, and I don't have, obviously, I didn't want to show too many pictures. In Khubbezi there's a Tahuni, one of the mills that sits right there on the river in Khubbezi, Ghadir Khubbezi. Beit Nabala, Ramli, this is a picture of the cemetery completely. That's really the only thing there. There's just a couple of graves standing. Partially erased villages. So these are villages that you could still walk in and know there used to be something, and you can identify what these buildings are. I took this, I included this picture, and right after I did this, there was a news that the Israelis demolished this house. This house was standing for the longest time, and I visited the Al-Bassa quite a few times, and this belonged to Al-Khoury, the Ailat Al-Khoury, Beit Fakhim, I'm sorry. It's a beautiful, large, beautiful house. They literally just a couple of weeks ago demolished this house. Deir al-Qasi, there are about 7 buildings, houses still standing, beautiful structures, absolutely beautiful structures, still there, but not reachable by, not accessible to Palestinians, and it's surrounded by the new settlement. Tulail, that's the only building remaining. It's a khan of Tulail. That's the only building that's remaining. Everything else around it is gone. Balad al-Sheikh near Haifa, that's the shrine of Sheikh Sahli. There are a couple of other, two buildings that are currently used by the Israelis as one of them as both of them actually as synagogues. Wadi Hunain, I'm told there is another building that exists, a Palestinian house. I haven't been able to find it yet, but this used to be the mosque, Beit Hunain Mosque. It's converted, and that's kind of a funny, not funny, but a funky story, converted into a synagogue. And at the entrance to the synagogue, there's a plaque that said, this used to be the mosque of the Al-Hunain village. So there's no denying, and you can tell, if you look at historic pictures, you'll see this building with the minaret. So this one is without the minaret, obviously. Al-Ghabsiyya near Akka, it's really the only building that is still standing, which is the mosque of Al-Ghabsiyya. Al-Khalasa in the Bir Sabia area, it's kind of a different type of architecture. It has a lot of partial buildings strewn all around. Intact villages, put that in parentheses because intact is a question of definition. Al-Malha, it's actually almost a complete village utilized by the Israelis. Even the mosque was utilized not as a mosque, but once as a nightclub, and then someone else bought it and they used it as a residence. Ain Karim, same thing. Ain Karim is a complete village with houses, and the mosque is utilized as a tourist attraction by the Israelis, not as a mosque. But the church is still inactive. Still active. Ijzim, talked about Ijzim. Jaouni, one of the most beautiful villages in northern Palestine. Absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the Safad villages, huge number of houses and buildings that are still utilized by the current settlers. Ain Hod, that requires a complete talk, a separate session on it. Yes. But the village itself is still intact, and they turned it into an artist's colony. And Lifta, I'm sure everyone knows Lifta. It was lived in briefly after 1948, but then the newcomers left it. So it's still there. The buildings are semi-intact, but it's huge and it's absolutely gorgeous. And Lukweikat is one of Akka's villages. It's still, most of the houses are still being utilized. I mean, they're still there, Palestinian houses being utilized by the newcomers. And I will stop right here.
Hello. I really wish I can see also the audience. I'm so glad I'm here today. And I also wish to be in Pennsylvania by the time, but I had no luck with visa. But yes, let's start with the presentation because we have like short time to share. I just want to be able to share my screen, please. Because I'm taking them, there's a message like host disabled participants screen sharing. So.
Thank you all for being patient.
Yeah, I'm sure this will get fixed in a second.
Okay. Thank you, Dana, for being patient.
No worries. It's my pleasure. It's like 12 a.m. now in Palestine.
Where are you in Palestine?
Ramallah.
In Ramallah.
All right.
In Ramallah, yes.
Your favorite city?
Yes, it is my favorite city.
Your favorite city?
It is.
Yes, while we're waiting for this.
All right. Dana,
Shall I try?
Dana, can you do me a favor? Can you email it to us real quick, and then we'll try to put it on the screen here, and then you'll be able to see it and kind of tell us what to do? Just so that we can fix the problem.
I'll just forward it then. Okay.
Yeah, email it to me, I guess. Or who should email it to?
Yes. One moment.
If it's
To which email?
Email it to me, and then I'll just send it to them. Now everybody gets my Amer Zaher, AMERZAHR @gmail.com. Oh, she can share now? Oh, okay, we fixed it. Damn, right after I gave everybody my email address.
That's easier.
Including all the CIA agents in the audience. Okay, can you share your screen now, Dana? Can you try now?
I can do it.
Wonderful.
I have your
Okay,
email
great.
now. That's perfect.
Wonderful. It's working now. Thank you.
all right.
شكرا. Give me a moment. Okay. So hopefully, yeah. So I'm really honored today to be part of Palestine Rights, and thank you for the introduction, and Noura, Ibrahim, I'm really honored to be part of this panel. So this is a project that is very dear for me personally, because I'm someone who spent her life between Ramallah and Jerusalem. I studied in Jerusalem, and now I'm based in Ramallah. And الخريطة المغيبة, or the absent map, is a research project that is basically rethinking the geography of Jerusalem and rethinking the maps of rural Jerusalem. These are some images of Riwaq's projects in rural Jerusalem. Riwaq is a center that is main mandate is to preserve and save the architectural cultural heritage in rural Palestine. It has been there for 30 years, and we're working in 22 different villages, and now we are focusing on rural Jerusalem, specifically the villages that are behind the wall, like the ones that are part of the Palestinian Authority and totally disconnected from the urban center of Jerusalem. This is Kufar Aqab, this is Jaba, so it's this beautiful rural landscape and beautiful architecture. This is Qalandia. So basically this project is a research, or rather a search, for what made and still makes the geography of Jerusalem a whole. While we were renovating and bringing life back to rural Jerusalem, we knew that we need to rethink this geography together, because no village ever stand alone in Palestine. It was a whole ecosystem, communities that depended on each other, that depended on the resources of each other. So like really renovating one village alone is something that is very harsh, and it really in a way makes us confess the brutal reality of colonialism that we are living under. So this geography of walls, checkpoints, and barriers is something we want to go against in our project, and it's about sketching this geography. So here I'm quoting Edward Said, and Edward Said was saying that geography is therefore the art of war, but can also be the art of resistance if there is a counter map and a counter strategy. So in our effort to reimagine these connections between Jerusalem and going beyond the physical, beyond the geopolitics, we can only think about maps as representations of geography. And maps, in a way, is something that we architects do very well, but also colonizers master even better than us. So making a counter map or rethinking the map of rural Jerusalem was the main thing that we need to encounter. And here I'm quoting Hana Allan. She's a farmer from El Jib. And she put this idea of mapping and imagining geography otherwise in a very beautiful way. She was saying El Jib was called al-Tawabin, being famous for making tawabin and pots of clay. And then I will go to the women who were making different kinds of cooking pots and used to hold them on their heads and sell them later in Jerusalem, making the journey on foot through Al-Kharayib. This settlement, Jev'on, was the village's mudland. We used to bring the mud for making pottery from that hill. So Hannah, in a way, she shared the story around pottery making, but it also shed some light and unveiled a whole set of flows and transitions, stitching in our shattered geography. Her story illustrates a network of associations, which were a backbone of a Palestinian agrarian community at the time. So this is just a short video to share. So in 2018, we started a series of sketching tours with elderlies and younger generations who are now between 60s and 19 years old. People with intimate knowledge of their villages, to the historic centers, but also intimate information about the landscape. They are farmers, descendants of pottery makers, women who used to tour the area looking for water, or even children who explored the geography on their journeys to school. Such personal accounts reasserted a new depth to the lived geography of Jerusalem area and redrew a map of organic lines which temporarily dissolved the lines of today's Jerusalem, of walls and barriers. It also brings the peasant's voice back to narrating place and history, a narrative hardly represented in the city's formal accounts. All these accounts were documented through sketching, but also recording, videos, and stills. The sketches can be read as a story, maybe a comic, a documentation, but also it allowed us to unpack the different layers of the spoken narratives. We were drawing buildings, maps, mythical characters, holy trees, journeys, landscapes, objects, seeds. Sketching in a way became a medium, not only for representation, but for making these stories and storytellers present in the geography, a geography that is usually in a way erase these people. We were interviewing sociologists, historians, and elderlies from all around rural Jerusalem, especially where we work as Riwaq, from Kufar Aqab, Jaba, Al-Jib, Qalandia, and Beit Hanina. We gathered these sketches along the past years, and once collaging them together, the stories start to, in a way, connect. And we noticed that, in a way, we can really redraw a map out of these connections. It's maybe a mental map, maybe a visual map, but it is a representation of the geography in a way. And through these sketching exercises, we also realized that production is key in understanding the connections between these villages. When we talk about production, we're talking about agricultural production basically, but also industrial, even cultural. It has always been central in creating and developing the spatial relationships between the built environments in rural Jerusalem. It created a spatial network triggered by social and economic interactions. Production in Palestine was not only an economic activity, but it acted as a social and cultural element that is embedded in the Palestinian everyday life. This role makes production a unique material to reading the geography of the Palestinian village and cities, especially in the most affected areas by the Israeli borders and walls. Having a closer look at these sketches, in a way, we can see how these narratives are drawn, and you can talk sometimes about a journey, as we can see here. Sometimes it's about a personal story. Some other times it's architectural plans and buildings. And in a way, to understand and comprehend these connections, we made this exercise of making a diagram of nodes and connections of these different elements we had in the map. Places, people, objects, and raw materials. Those were our main nodes. Then we have the connections. They are connected by geography, they are connected by production, or they are connected by raw materials, by markets, by community. And in a way, it became clearer for us how close these communities are and where, and how easy we can dissolve the brutality of the segregation wall if we want to. All these stories and narratives, all these sketches and videos are now shared at the website of Riwaq for everyone to dig into. And we are always open to share the knowledge that we have. And later on, like the last year, for around a year and a half, 3 artists were invited also to work more on this idea of counter mapping. Ragad worked on the concept of mud making, and she was tracing the mud of Al-Jib. And Al-Block Collective were working more on the idea of excursions and walking in the landscape, and they were reconnecting Beit Hanina, which is now 2 Beit Haninas, through walking. And Wassam Kurman was traveling and following the footsteps of school students, and she drew this beautiful map, which is the map of students who moved between Kufar Aqab, Qalandia, and Al-Jib to go to their schools back and forth. She also resembled like the landscape in between, the stories in between, and even their relation to Jerusalem can be seen in this map. And by the end of this project, we were able to produce a book. It's one of Riwaq's recent publications. It's called Rif Bila Madine. And this title itself, it's a statement. It talks about this loss, but it also talks about how we can go against this loss and how we can regain, in a way, Jerusalem in a different way. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that absolutely beautiful presentation, Dana. And now we're going to open it to questions from the audience. So try to keep your questions less autobiographical,
yeah.
should we say?
Try to keep them questions. Raise your hand and I will come to you. Is anybody raised? I don't.
Maybe the session is so perfect.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say. Yes, please.
Hey, I have a question. Why they decided to keep some of the villages and erase part of them? Like, what is the strategy? We know when it comes to Israel and Israelis, nothing is random.
No, it's not.
It's not random, and I think, and
Did everyone hear her question?
also jump in.
Why do they keep some of these houses? Yeah, sorry.
So I think there was geopolitical reasons that they've done what they've done with some of the villages. In the north, they wiped them out because they wanted to make sure anything close to the border stays as clean as possible. And that's almost, you can only find few villages that have something standing there. In other places where they felt secure, there's no threat. I mean, I'll give you, as an example, the small triangle. I talked about Ijzim. There are three villages in that triangle: Ijzim, Ain Ghazal, and Jaba. Ijzim, as I said, almost intact. Ain Ghazal completely destroyed twice, and Jaba, the same thing, wiped out. The only thing left is the old cemetery and the shrine. The reason is, in that case, they would have kept all of them if the villagers surrendered. And I think Ain Ghazal, they saw the most resistance. I remember anecdotally, I was there visiting like 3-4 years ago, and I was walking behind an Israeli family. And the father was explaining to his young kids, we came in here, there's no one here. No one resisted, we just took it. And it's actually the complete opposite of what happened in Ain Ghazal, as one of the examples, is that there was resistance. They came, they tried to take it over once, they bombed it, they destroyed as much as they could, then they were pushed back. And then ultimately they came back, and when they took it over, they wiped it. The only thing you can find in Ain Ghazal that's still standing, it's the old cemetery, almost completely destroyed, but it's still there. A couple of important graves still standing, and the shrine. And the rest is half a wall here, a pile of rubble there. So it's more of, in that case, they would have kept everything because they can use it. And at Ijzim, there was, the resistance was less so, and they were able to utilize the village almost completely as is. Does that answer it?
I think it's also important to add that we have because of what's left and because of the places that we still, not only what's left, but what we have access to and have, romanticized imagery of, etc., we think that there was a lot more stone in Palestine in 1948 than there was. So my family's village, Isdoud, for example, was 85-90% still mud houses, tin. That's not something that's going to stay standing. And already the village was turning over into stone in the mid to late 40s, right? And had 48 not happened, it would have completed that turnover, which is why the buildings that are still standing are the few first stone houses that were built. The school, as my aunt always points out, the girls' school that she never got to use, and the masjid and the mosque. And then I think a small shrine. But basically, especially in the southern Sahel on the coast and all through the breadbasket, so the areas that were growing wheat, most of these houses in 48 were still mud-based. So that's part of the reason also you see a large kind of wipeout across those villages. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the north, not only was stone already being used more prevalently, but you have a population that stays, right? So you have Palestinian 48, you have the Palestinian 48 population in villages like Sakhnin and in the Galilee that are able to sort of maintain and grow these spaces. And so it's very kind of like night and day. So there's some strategy certainly as far as the Israelis are concerned, and then some of it is also just like where our construction was at the time that the Nakba happens.
But also just personal observations. When I started my journey 6 years ago, I tend to repeat my visits at least 3 or 4 times to places that I got to know, and I'm discovering that buildings are intentionally torn down. One example is Khirbet al-Burj, which is south of Haifa. Nothing really was left of it. I mean, this was a village that was taken over by the Rothschilds before 1948, decades before 1948. But nevertheless, the only structure that was left is the Khan. And twice now, in 2 successive years, they tore down the first half, and now they tore down the other half of this side of the Khan. The other building is still standing. So there is an intention. I mean, what happened with Beit al-Khoury fil Bassa is absolutely intentional. There's no reason for that building to crumble. It's a solid building built with brick and concrete. So I agree with you. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. But there is definitely an intention, even now that they've won the war. Even now, they're still going after standing structures and standing villages.
Let's just see if Dana has an answer to your question. Dana, do you have an answer to the question? Could you hear it?
Yeah, I did hear it, and I think, Yani, it was already answered. I just wanted to add that even the villages that remained after the war of 1948 and after occupation, like when we look at, for example, Lifta, like this debate, it's still open, even inside Israel itself, like why these structures are still remain for up to date. And there was this idea also that they need to gentrificate it to make it more like an investment area or a garden, a national garden. So there was all these strategies of erasure. Like when we talk about, for example, West, they made it a national park. So this was another way to reclaim the space in their own way through landscaping and romanticizing the space. And it was a violent act of erasure through this soft component, landscape, for example. So I think it's a process. It's not something that only happened in 1948. It's a thing that it's still debated even inside the Israeli regime, and it's still ongoing somehow.
Thank you. One of the questions that came up with us is how can we help? Now, this is a question that could be asked in so many of these seminars this weekend, and it may not be a question that would occur to a Palestinian because you're already doing what you can, and it's more of a historical educational process. But for a non-Palestinian such as we are, you hear about all this stuff and you say, well, how can I help? And it's not just in geography, but in other areas I've been talking about this weekend. So I think it's a question worth asking, and when appropriate, worth suggesting. I mean, you don't have to do it, but how could we help? You know, that it would just something would be interesting to know.
I mean, one of the things that I would say to keep in mind with when you're exposed to these kind of projects is exposure to these kinds of projects is much more rare than one would like. Mm-hmm. So also sharing those projects with those around you, with your community. It's amazing to me how much impact there is for those who are able to travel to Palestine when they come back. Mm-hmm. A good friend of mine took her parents and, you know, and showed them around, a lovely American family from North Carolina. And she took her parents purposefully through Colombia at like the middle of the night. And I was like, why did you, like, you could have taken them to Hezma. And she was like, no, I wanted my mom to see the checkpoint. And her mom, since they've been, this was almost a decade ago, her mom, since they've been back, has taught 15 different seminars at her church.
That's fantastic.
On Palestine because of that one trip. So I think what that looks like for you and your community is going to be very different. But exposure to these projects, you know, passing on that exposure is one thing. And the other thing I think on the other side is for us as Palestinians is understanding that the people doing these projects, whether it's Dana, whether it's the students in the Reconstruction competition, whether it's Ibrahim himself or our trips home or our self-education of these things, we are not doing this just for the sake of archiving. We aren't just trying to create an old dusty archive. This is a living archive, and this is something that people are actively sort of storing this information with the very specific intention of rebuilding it. And so I think that that's always an important thing to kind of reinfuse into these conversations.
Yeah, I wanted just also to reintroduce the concept of solidarity and the importance of solidarity when we talk about these relations between different nations and different people. And I think this is something that have been really changing along the years. Like it have been that this moment in the history of the Palestinian struggle towards liberation, that there was this move of solidarity all around the world. And we know how harder things are getting to be now, but to be in solidarity with the Palestinian cause is a very important thing and have many different shapes. It can be by talking about it, by knowing more about it, being more involved. To visit Palestine with new eyes and this openness to understand the context and not to romanticize our struggle, not to romanticize our lives there. I think it's important to, I think everyone have a different way to engage with the Palestinians' cause. And it really depends on what you can offer, who you are, what potentials you have, and how you can offer this kind of solidarity from your own position, from your own stage somehow.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that question.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying.
My question won't take a long time, and it's a little bit idiosyncratic, but I'm just wondering if you visited or planning on visiting Hlegat, because that's my home.
Hlilat?
Yeah. It's super small. Most people haven't heard of it.
I have not, I'll find it. Promise you this, I'll find it. But I have not visited it yet.
It's next to Simsim,
Yeah.
Kaukaba.
Yep.
But okay, well,
Yep.
if you ever go, then
I'll keep you,
I would love to see.
I'll post about it.
Thank you.
Who was back here? Oh.
So I was wondering how you find the villages you go to, especially the ones that only there's a few stones left of the houses. Do you look at maps and then hike around that general area, or
What's your name again?
Jenna?
How old are you?
11.
Anyway, I love you. Okay, go ahead.
So, yeah, very good question. I think when I first started 6 years ago, I partnered with someone who was a friend of mine who knew every single village. Amazingly, I spent 30 years identifying and visiting these villages repeatedly. But soon I've decided I'm going to just continue with my own path, and I've utilized a lot of maps, whether there are pre-48 maps from the Mandate, maps from even the Ottoman times, and maps even post 1948. There's an organization that's an Israeli organization, but it's really run by Palestinians. It's called Zochrot. In Hebrew, it basically talks about memory. And they've done one of the amazing things that they've done. They developed an app. It's a map online that I encourage anyone. I mean, if you're whether you're there or whether you just simply want to kind of learn more about these villages, they developed a map with the location of all. They're missing about 120 villages, but never mind. The location of the villages, the ethnically cleansed villages. And I often use that. It is not always 100% accurate, but I use it and I compare it with other resources that I have access to. And that's the way I'm able to find my way. And this is what I said earlier when I spoke, and that it's not an easy process. And I approach this very cowboy-like. I'm going to visit every village, and soon discovered it's a monumental task. It's not very easy, not just because of the restrictions that the Israelis impose on us, but also locating these villages is not as easy as everyone thinks they are. But generally these are the resources that I rely on.
So I'm going to guess we have time for maybe one more.
Yeah, we can do one more.
I just wanted to add something to what Mr. Ibrahim.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Dana.
Please do.
No, because he was mentioning Trout. Now there's a Palestinian app called Najm Sahel, which is also working in the same way and like tracking different villages, different locations, and it's mainly based on tracing hikers' tracks who are now trying to be more present in the geography, especially beyond the wall, like areas which were occupied in 1948. So also it's interesting to look at it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Ibrahim. I see on your bio that you live in the U.S. and I assume you have a passport from there. So is that what allows you to get to all these sites? And can any, I mean, obviously, and even with having the right passport to get to the sites, has there been any hint that they are aware of your project and then want to shut it down?
I mean, yeah, so I'm public with it. It's not, I don't hide anything. I'm, you know, thanks to social media, everyone sees what the places that I visit. I do get comments, I do get attacks from certain people, but they're in terms of awareness, they're aware of it. It's not that piece of it. It's more of the physical aspect. When I get there and I'm confronted by the farm owner or the farmland owner who says to me, this is private property, you cannot come in. And I find it kind of a little bizarre because here I am the original owner of this land being told by a foreigner that I cannot come in. Or even worse, once a farmhand, a Thai farmhand, no, it's no insult to Thai people, absolutely not. He stops me at the fence and he says in broken Hebrew, you cannot come in, this doesn't belong to you, it belongs to this man over there. It's these things that more of don't stand in your way, but there are stick out of the ground rather than actual official people chasing after. I mean, I'm a citizen of that entity. I have a passport, of an Israeli passport, as well as an American passport. I can go anywhere I want. They have zero right to stop me from doing anything that's not illegal. So I haven't been stopped from that perspective, except for security people stopping me, farmers stopping me, the new landowners stopping me. But that you overcome these things.
One thing I would add too is that one of the reasons actually that we have some of the information that we do in regards to locations and being able to find these locations is not just the British survey maps that keep coming back out. It's actually because, especially in the south, like around Gaza, the Majdad and Isdoud and these villages, people kept sneaking over the armistice line and kept going back to their villages well into the 50s and well into the early 60s. And so, I mean, we have family members that went well into the 80s. So there was still quite a bit of that. I mean, people were maintaining the cultivability of the land well into the 70s because they were so convinced and determined that they were going to get back.
Dana, do you want to add anything? No? Okay. It was a question for Ibrahim, but I think it's a very general question. I want to just conclude this by saying this is living history. This is how history is written, and it's not just written by historians. History is created, history is monumentalized, history is regularized by this kind of bearing witness, and also by the power of maps and reorienting maps, no pun intended, but reorienting maps and retelling the power of maps. And so I hope that you stand with me in complete awe of the kind of work that has been done by our panelists, and I hope you will join me in thanking them for their hard work and their generosity.
Yes.